Well, good morning.
Good morning.
How's the coffee? Good. I'm sitting out here and I'm thinking I need to make some editorial changes because I didn't quite write up here what I wanted to last night. So well, I'm going to make some corrections here in just a minute. Maybe this will help you just a little bit. In Ephesians it says this. It says that if you speak the truth in love, most people don't know what the next piece is. Speaking the truth in love, it says, thereby grow up. So usually we teach the speaking the truth in love and then end the sentence, like it's the end, and it's not. It's the substance of why you do that is so that you can grow up. Speaking the truth in love about yourself means that you take those hidden components of yourself that you've either hidden or hidden from you. I call them blind spots. I don't think Christians have a dark side. I think Christians have a blind side, a part of us that we don't see. Does that make sense? We don't have a shadow self. We don't have a hidden piece to us in the sense of there's some evil lurking in us and it's battling with the good. That's not what the Bible's message is. The Bible's message is that you are made new. You're a new creation. That Jesus does the work that gets us there. And so speaking the truth in love, thereby grow up, it means that you need the truth to get there. So I wrote the word truth up here, but I really meant to write trust. However, since I can't spell very well, that's what it should look like. Trust is about relationship. Knowledge is about being in control. And so I just wanted to contrast those two, and I just talked about trust like I'd written trust up there, but I didn't. I wrote truth, so fix it. And let's go on in the verse in Ephesians. It says, speaking the truth in love, thereby grow up. Do you know what the next line is? In all aspects. Well, that's really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how do we grow up in all aspects. That there's not one piece of us, our experience, our view, our thoughts, our perceptions, our puzzlements, our desires, our longings, our hopes, our dreams, our history, our anticipation, our fears. It doesn't matter. There's not one piece of us that doesn't come under the rubric or the umbrella of all aspects. Physical, emotional, social, financial, sexual. Name one. There's not one. And what Paul's saying, I think, is something that we kind of skim over. Just like for years I thought the verse was speaking the truth in love. End of sentence, whole sentence, period. That's not what it says. It says speaking the truth in love, thereby grow up in all aspects. And then he goes on and he talks about how hard it is to speak the truth in love. Just the modifier of loving changes things, but it doesn't allow you, he says in a few verses later, he says, speak the truth, don't lie. So you don't have the option of lying about yourself. You have to come clean somehow. We talk about authenticity and transparency and vulnerability, great words, right? But the practical side of it is that most people stop because it's too strenuous, too painful, too uncomfortable, too new, whatever, however you want to frame that. And then a few verses later he says, don't let any unwholesome word come out of your mouth. So he says, speaking the truth doesn't give you license to either tell a white lie, fudge, hide things. So you can't lie. And you're not supposed to say negative things like awful things. Don't let any unwholesome word come out of your mouth, but only such a word that's good for, and then he gives you 3 more modifiers. Good for building people up, appropriate for the need of the moment, and gives grace. So he gives 3 modifiers. Besides love, okay? And so he's trying to flesh it out, and he's telling you, this doesn't come naturally, folks. This is counterintuitive behavior. In a fallen world, what comes naturally is to hide. What comes naturally is to skate. What comes naturally is to pretend. What comes naturally is to have a persona. And every kid in the world tries on a dozen personas before they find out which persona is going to work for them for a while. Huh? I've often thought, I'm a psychologist professionally, and I didn't really choose it. Some of you know my story well enough to know that I kind of backed into this thing. And I've often thought, a couple hundred years ago, I wouldn't have had a job because it didn't exist. I'd have done something. I'd still been HUD. Nothing about me would have changed in terms of who I am, who God made me to be, what my identity is. But I would have been radically different. So my persona is out here as professional, whatever, okay? But I'm not different. I like being married to somebody that I met when she was 15, I was 16, because she has no pretense about me. She knows all this hang-on stuff, degrees and labels and all that stuff. She knows that that's just what that is. It's just hang-on stuff. What's me is the same. Hopefully I've developed some, but the point is, from a personality standpoint, I haven't changed. I don't need to. God didn't make a mistake there. Okay? You don't have to develop your personality. No. You have to live into it and understand it. So speaking the truth in love, thereby grow up in all aspects. We're working on the all aspects piece today. And the hard part is, it seems like to me, that we accumulate things we have hidden from the world, and there comes a point in our life as adults that we face those things. And we decide, it's a decision point for most people, whether it's conscious or not. We literally make a decision to keep things hidden and finish out the race, or expose them and grow. You can't carry them and grow. You can't run the race encumbered and compete. You can't do it. You can limp into the future. It's not about limping. It's not about being wounded. It's about what you carry from that wound. Last night I suggested that there are people that are grievously wounded sexually. Sexual abuse is a heinous piece of the puzzle for lots of reasons. I think from a biblical standpoint, we're created in God's image generally, and then we're split gender-wise immediately. So he says, mankind's created in our image, male and female created he them, I think is how it's phrased. And so it's first as a person, second as a gender, right? But they're close together. So at the core of us is sexuality. It stays with us forever. You can't get rid of it. You carry it around 24/7. It impacts you in all dimensions. And it's freighted with all this extra stuff in our particular culture that is so heightened that, but we're not the only culture that's ever done that. This isn't new in history. It's just our history, and so that's what we experience, and we think that's normal. And that's where the Bible comes in. It gives you a different framework on which to operate. So my point is, if you're going to grow up, then you have to face hidden things. You have to face things that you're blind to, that you don't see. I have a phrase, I have to use it all the time, I guess, but it seems to fit, and it's that you can't see your own butt. You need somebody else's help. You've seen those goofy places where people walk out of the bathroom and they got toilet paper on their shoe or hanging out their skirt or something, and you're going, I'd like to say something to you, but it's too good. I'm not about to stop that. Sorry. If you have empathy, then you go talk to them. Can I remove this? Well, these things haunt us at some point, and most people push them down. That's called repression, actually. It's a way to not have to face it. And repression helps you psychologically because it keeps you from having to deal with the pain. If this represents reality, okay, the outside of reality, what we have a tendency to do with our lives is bracket reality by pulling those extremes in to something that we feel like we can manage, back to control, back to this knowledge piece, okay? So I just thought, as I was thinking about last night, I don't want you to get lost here. I want you to know that there's a line I would draw at this point, and I would say that most people's lives consist of those first three dynamics, and I would say essentially it's recognition of who you are, fighting that particular issue. Either you're going to trust God or you're going to trust yourself. You're either going to trust relationship or you're going to trust knowledge. And if it's knowledge, you're going to try to be in control. And we have a world that likes to be in control. Control, by the way, becomes a pretty nasty thing. It's hard to give up. Most people will not give up control unless they have to. If you're a controller, I'm sorry for you. I'm going to pray that maybe you can hear this today. If you like to control things, if you're kind of hyper that way, that almost always has to be wrested from us. We don't just open up typically. Very few people do. Almost all move as a result of crisis, not anything else. Some kind of crisis forces us to let go. A lot of times that's why people show up at the very end of their lives. Isn't that crazy? You wait your whole life to show up and tell somebody you love them or that you care or that they were important. And a lot of people miss it because their timing is off just a little bit. And whoops. I didn't quite get that said. And it's because they can't control anymore. They're not the head of their business. They're not in charge of stuff. They're now, what? Out of control, if you will. Healthy people, calm people, whole people, people that are functioning in a more growing, oriented way, are rooted, anchored, whatever word you want. They have a stability about them. They have a calming influence in any setting, no matter how intense it is. And it's not that they're stoic. This is not about stoicism. This is about being your own person and realizing that control is something that's a lie. You don't have control. You don't have control over your next breath. I learned that from a professor, a friend of mine that I was teaching with. His wife died while they were watching TV. They were watching a TV show, and she, sitting next on the couch, he tells the story. She just kind of slowly put her head down in his lap, and he said, "Isn't that sweet?" And the doc said she was dead by the time she hit your lap. She had a brain aneurysm. Boom, gone. We're in control? I don't think so. But we pretend, don't we? We spend lots of energy on that. That's this third category. We want to control things. We want to have it together. I think last night I talked about self-control, having your ego under control. A lot of what we have to deal with as adults is finally deal with our ego. We have to figure out, and so we ended last night talking about self. Tricky subject. Contextual, big subject. A lot of people in psych don't even think self exists, think we've manufactured it, because it's immaterial, because you can't measure it. And if it can't be measured, as one person said, it doesn't exist. Well, that's science, and science has its limits. It can't measure the immaterial. It's out of control. So what science wants to do is reduce us all down to something very small. So science goes this way, starts out here big and goes down to the essential elements. It's reductionistic. It's a whole thought form. But what it does is it keeps us stuck because it gives us a sense of knowledge and control because we know the details. We know the smallest particles we can find. The smallest elements in whatever it is. But the Bible pushes you in just the opposite direction. It makes life more complex, not less. It gets you to have to grapple with bigger questions, not smaller ones, and be comfortable with them. So you're going in the opposite direction. Do you want me to draw it up here? It's like a V. Science is wonderful. This isn't picking on science. It's wonderful, but it needs to be in its place. It can't be God. And we've made scientism God. Like globalism is a God to some people. And anytime we shift that's where idolatry plays its role from a biblical standpoint. It moves the shift over from relationship to being in control. And it's that control piece that's really the fly in the ointment. Yesterday we talked about taking time, having space, sleeping more, taking deep breaths, relaxing. I appreciate the music because it gives you a chance to breathe just a little bit, just slow down just for a second. We're not used to quiet space. We get uncomfortable with it. A lot of people in social places just need words so they don't feel anxious instead of just relaxing. I don't know if you've ever been to like a brethren church service where everybody sits around and you wait until somebody has something to say. Wow, it's quiet in here. What's that about, you know? And if you're intense and you get off on intensity, sorry, I confess, it's hard sometimes. It's hard to take a breath and wait. It's hard to wait for a client to show up. It's magic when they do, because then it's on their own and you haven't prompted them or guided them or released the anxiety that's there, that's positive, that moves us. But we don't like tension. So I want to remind you, if you haven't heard me talk before, the Hebrew word for faith is translated faith, trust, belief, means to create more tension. So if you sit in my church, I'm not interested in you being comfortable. I'm interested in you being stretched, challenged, disturbed. I'm interested in you growing. I'm interested in you moving. I'm interested in you learning something. I'm not interested in you agreeing and having comfort as a result. And comfort isn't the goal. Growth is the goal. Growth in and of itself is comforting because you'll feel more content with yourself. You'll not be at the mercy of the circumstances in your life. You'll be able to see them for what they are, deal with them in the way that they come to you, and face them. You'll lean into them. You'll not run away, if you will. Well, this process actually has some elements in it that I would like to list for you, and we won't talk about them all, but maybe this will help you just a little bit. If you can think about what adults have to deal with if they're going to grow, these are some of the elements. First one is letting go of your ego. You don't need to be noticed. You don't need to get credit. You don't need to be taken care of. You don't need to be attended to. You're okay in your own skin. Somebody doesn't have to come up and pat you on the head and say you're good. You don't need accolades and approval and all that kind of stuff. You are at some point in time kind of self-contained in a way. Our language is hazardous with this stuff, so be careful. You can poke at me at every point. I get that. Any metaphor falls off the edge eventually. It just can't hold the weight of the conversation. But letting go of ego is a big piece of the puzzle about growing up. You might call it humility. Maybe humility sets in, has a role to play in that. Humility is where I don't need to be noticed. I just need to get the job done. 2 or 3 researchers in leadership say the same thing. The best leaders wind up being the most humble. There's a guy that writes in that field, has written 2 books recently. His name's Shine, S-C-H-I-E-N or something. Anyway, he's written phenomenal books that impact the whole world of leadership and business. And the last 2 he's written is about humility. Both of them have humility in the title. Because he realizes that's what we're missing in our culture. What we have is we have a whole bunch of egocentric children leading because they have the gifts to lead, but they don't have the development to lead. They don't have the character. Does that make sense? We're going to talk about character. That's what we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. I'm going to give you a handout here and give you the elements that go into character and why it's complex. And that's the other thing I wanted to say this morning. I want to emphasize that what you run into as you try to grow as an adult is extreme complexity. it first is introduced to you as an adolescent, because an adolescent begins to, for the first time, all kinds of things coalesce into the same space, and they have to begin to deal with it, which is emotion and autonomy and decision making and cause and effect and feelings. Yeah, I already said that, but it sounds like I know a lot if you say it twice in two different words. Motion, feelings, good. And so you have these elements, and they all are beginning to coalesce, and the brain can't quite handle it all. No wonder kids are goofy. So this afternoon I'm going to talk about brain development a little bit in terms of how it affects us when we do a marital dance or relational dances that are intense. So this piece about letting go of your ego is a huge piece. Transformation can't occur if you've got yourself on your hands. Maybe that's a way to say it. Your ego on your hand. Transformation cannot occur if you have your ego on your hands. So if I'm carrying myself around here and you have to accept me, I have to be okay. My hands are full of me. They're taken care of by me. Every child has himself on his hands. Almost all adolescents do. If they have a zit on their nose, they become a zit. They are no longer a person, Mary Jane or something. They are the zit. And they can't go anywhere because they'll simply what? Die. And sometimes adolescents do die, from stuff like that. Why? Well, because they got themselves on their hands. And this letting go of ego means that you let go of that. That no longer is the driver. I was so insecure growing up that I had myself in my hands all the time. All the time. I had to be right. That was a fussing piece for me. And I like to be right. That's not bad. I figured that out later. But at that time I had to be right in defense. Now watch. In self-protection of me. Your self-protective behaviors, my self-protective behaviors are so entrenched in us that to erode those is massive, but it's the source of whether you're going to be free or not or grow. And it shows up in those crazy places where there's lots of pressure, stress, etc. on you, and it's going to squeeze it out of you in some way. And we all have it, and it never goes away, so it's not like you're going to master this. I don't know if I said it last night. Nobody gets mature. It's not an achievable place. Nobody. It's a place, it's a moving target, number one, and number two, the minute you think you have it, it's like humility. If you get the I'm humble button, don't wear it, because it's kind of... Okay, so one thing is letting go of ego. Second thing, learning how to give up control. Control generally, not just control of your ego, but ego needs really are this piece of us that causes self-protection. And self-protection is probably the biggest fly in the ointment. We could spend the rest of the time just talking about self-protection. Getting yourself off your hands means that you trust that the God you're walking with says you're good, you're okay. You don't have to do anything now to earn that. Period. End of sentence. It's hard for us who are performers, which is this third category, who have learned how to perform. Wow, If you want this in biblical terms, this would be coming to know God at the first, choosing to trust that a good God serves you. The second piece right here, dying to live, really is all about discipleship. It's about learning the basic tenets of Christianity. But most discipleship programs now, they even have discipleship conferences. And I've read probably 15 discipleship manuals or curriculums because I'm interested in it. And all of them pose that this is a lifetime project, this discipleship thing. I don't think that's true. I think discipleship is a narrow bandwidth in development that gives you the tenets of Christianity. It allows you to identify with people or leaders or other fellow strugglers that have walked the same route. It gets you into the community in some way. And then we add the next dimension, which is this third group, which is the stuff that you do. If you're really a good Christian, you're going to do these things. And this side of development is all external. And it's usually driven by the hidden self. the illusion of self, the not the real person, but this other stuff. And by the way, being real, having a real self and having integrity doesn't mean that you say everything you think. Honesty is not the highest value in Christianity. Love is. Love covers a multitude of sins. Speaking the truth in love still doesn't allow you to tell a lie, but if you trust your own honesty, you're the fool because you don't know enough about you. Life is way too complex. So can I add that back into the mix? The thing I think we miss most of the time from the front is because we're so reductionistic in our culture. We want a simple answer, and there's nothing simple about being a whole person. You are complex. God's creation is complex, and the complexity of it is not for us to know. And it's all through Scripture where God says, trust me. Not blindly. He never asks you to do that. Not just leap off the building with no substance to it. But he simply says, as I think it was Francis Schaeffer said, he says, God always gives an answer, and it's a sufficient answer. It's a good answer, and it's a sufficient answer. It's not an exhaustive answer. Or he says later, he says, no miracle is ever complete. Take that one on. How about Lazarus? Pretty good miracle if you believe it. You know, dead, alive. Dead again. Whoops. What happened there? And would it be less of a miracle if he was dead again 10 minutes later as opposed to 10 years? I mean, where's that in the story, right? That's how I read Scripture. I just go, really? Really? You know, I mean, there's a lot of reallys here. And it's because we're not designed to know all of this stuff. Last night I talked about how these two guys have said to us, you know, when it comes to decision making, we have so many biases, hardly any of our decisions are rational, are really solid decisions. It's because we have all this other crazy stuff going on. Okay, so learning how to let go of control is the second one. Third one, moving beyond your intellect. Moving beyond your intellect means that you hold what you know lightly. You're tentative. You're not likely to stand up with hands on hips yelling at somebody and saying, I'm right, you're wrong. One person said, when you're insecure about truth, you shout louder. You wave banners, you go on marches. By the way, I liked, this is just a pure sidebar, I liked two banners I saw during the march after just here recently. And one was a kid that had a cardboard sign he was holding up, and it said, I heart trains. I thought, yeah, now that's, I could march for that, you know. And then there was another one, a baby, really. I mean, he was probably 18 months old or something, and he was holding up a sign. He's on top of his father's shoulders, he's holding up on top of his father's head. It just had Crayola scribbles on it. I thought, finally, two people I can resonate with deeply. Living beyond your intellect. We have so latched onto knowledge, which is this mistake, this lie. We've so latched onto knowledge that we think we know. This last election cycle should shudder every Christian from my point of view. Wherever you are on the political spectrum, I don't care. What I care about is that you understand that all of that stuff is necessary to govern a man. All the spectrum. You can't just be on one end of it. I did a thing with a Bible study not too long ago. This is a sidebar. There are 6 elements that go into all philosophy. Sorry, every philosophy has to answer these 6 questions. And the questions are truth, goodness, beauty, justice, equality, liberty. Those are the 6, and there's not a philosophy in the world that doesn't address them. But they need to all be present. You can't pick and choose, but we do, don't we? because we don't want it complex. So we just want it to be beautiful, or we just want it to be true, or we just want it to be something. And we'll yell for that. I love truth. Well, I do too, but that's not all there is. There's liberty, justice, equality, and beauty and goodness that have to be attended to in this mix. So we did it with the Bible. So we had a fun conversation one evening just talking about how hard it is to manage all 6 of those things. But there's people written about them since written things have been around, and so it behooves us to pay attention. This piece about letting go of your intellect means that you are not going to trust your own thinking as the final arbiter of what's true truth, as Francis Schaeffer called it. True truth is more than just thought. It's beyond that. It's this relational dynamic that the God of the universe calls us into in some way. Now, I work in a field that's pushing that out and saying, that's just nonsense. That's what the atheists do, etc. But they don't think very well because they want to bracket their thoughts and argue in a small range instead of over the whole thing. And what's lovely about Scripture is that it doesn't mitigate anything on the whole line of reality. It doesn't bracket reality. It leaves it out here. And I've been taught so poorly, so many places, and dragged bad theology through my world for such a long time. I want to fight it. So a little bit of what I'm saying to you is think, work at this. Don't give up. If it doesn't make sense, pray and start working, because this is hard work, what we're asking. So that was what? The third one? Is that what okay, the fourth one is really recognizing that there's something bigger than you that exists in the world. Having a transcendent view of reality, believing in God, having a higher power. I don't care what you call it. It's one of the things that takes place when a person moves into this painful healing piece, is they're going to have to grapple with the fact that they are not God at some level. As long as they hold to the God concept, that they're God, then they're stuck. And it doesn't matter whether you're Nietzsche, who couldn't get over that hurdle, or it doesn't matter who. Okay, you can't grow in terms of Paul's writing, where he says, speaking the truth in love, thereby grow up in what? All aspects. It's that all aspects that gets pulled out from the discussion, because that's the demanding piece. You can't leave anything off the table. You can corral 5 of these items, and then you got 2 left, and they're running around willy-nilly. Well, those will undermine you. It's like having a little bit of, pardon me, shit in your water bottle. I mean, it can just be a little tiny bit, but you're not going to want to drink it. I don't think. Is that recorded? I'm so sorry. I lost it. Just completely lost. Recognizing that you're not God, recognizing that you're not in control, recognizing that you're not right, and don't need to be. One of the strong messages I got out of the church was, you need to be right. I don't think that's right. We're just so limited, we can't even say it, without it being, you can just shoot holes in it, can't you? That's how hard this is, and that's why it's such an art, not a science, if you will, at some point. Okay, number 5. You have to embrace your whole self with your blind side. Wholeness. Folks, we live in a world that silos everything, that categorizes, that, what's the word that I heard not too long ago? It's about Bill Clinton. He had this tremendous ability to just be present in this state, but this state had nothing to do with this position in his mind. So he was here. He had a category here and a category here, and the two never got together. What? Compartmentalize. Thank you. I knew there was a word out there. Compartmentalize ourselves, but there's no bridges between the two. There's no connections between the two, and so they don't talk to each other, and they don't inform each other, and then they don't yield to each other, submit, surrender, whatever word you want to use. They're stuck because we develop in these narrow confines. I don't know how many men I've talked to that are great at their work and they provide for their family, but they can't be present with their family because that's too much exposure, and that's on the emotional side. This they can control. So they can control their business or their work, and so they stay busy in that. So I want to make a comment about busyness since we talked about it last night, and I want to read you a verse. Here it's in Isaiah 28. And it's actually verse 16. It says, "Therefore, thus says the Lord God, behold, I am laying in Zion a stone." What's that stone? Jesus. It's okay. It's the right answer now. Good guess. It's right. It's not a squirrel. It's a stone. If you've heard the joke. "Behold, I'm laying in Zion a stone, a tested stone, a costly cornerstone for the foundation." It's the foundation, and it's firmly placed. That's the end of the sentence. Then he goes, "He who believes in that stone, or in Jesus, will not be disturbed." The Hebrew word disturbed means will not be in a hurry, will not make haste. You believe in Jesus, you'll be a calming presence in your world because you will never be in a hurry. 90% of anger comes from being in a hurry. Not having enough time, being late, no space. Just what we were talking about last night. You drive a wedge in the line of the timeline of your life, and you put Jesus in that wedge. What it'll do for you is it will give you space to slow down so that you are on time. Jesus was always on time, never late, and never in a hurry. Great line. It's a shame it's translated disturbed. Sorry. The Hebrew word. Huh?
Mary and Martha were pretty disturbed.
Yeah, they were disturbed. They were disturbed because Jesus was what? Perceived as being late for Lazarus. You could have helped him. You could have healed him. You could have, but here he is dead. And I'm sarcastic enough to think that Jesus needed him dead to raise him from the dead, It just makes sense to me. I'm not going to write a book about that, so relax. Anyway, he who believes in Jesus will not be in a hurry, will not make haste. You're a follower of Jesus? Listen to the language you just sang this morning. If he's a good father, and you're following him, he's not in a hurry. He's not asking you to be in a hurry. That doesn't mean you don't move quickly sometimes. That's not the point. Please. It's that you aren't disturbed inside. You're not self-defeating in some way. So that's, what's that? Embracing your whole self with all your blind sides. How are you going to get exposed to your blind sides?
You gotta bring it in the light.
What's that?
You gotta bring it in.
Well, you got to bring it in the light. How do we functionally do that? How does that happen functionally? Relationships, absolutely. Relationships are the driver. We grow in relationship. You almost can't grow in isolation. I won't go so far as to say you can't, but I think relationships are designed by God to expose our immaturities. And if you can't identify your own immaturities, watch out. Pity whoever you're in a relationship with, number one. Number two, I pity you because you're throwing away what God's offering you as an adult. And the sixth one, of facing your core with the puzzles, or we would call them weaknesses, and the strengths. Facing the core of you. It's another layer. It's the stuff that's there that you can't identify. So maybe I can draw this. I'll draw this down here at the bottom. I think that you have, I know it's going to be hard to see this, but you have maturity on one axis and age on the other. And the first 10, maybe 15 years of your life are pretty much emotionally driven. And what we know about memory is that it's so imperfect and not reproductive. It's productive. Your memory is not reproductive. It's always productive. Every time you remember something, you have to go find it, and you don't find all the memory because every memory is so complex, and it's not stored like in a filing cabinet like you would in a computer, because a computer uses binary stuff. Your brain is not like that. And so the stuff that you remember out of your history and the first 14 or 17 years of your life, something like that, those years are so fogged with memories that are not accurate. They can't be accurate simply because the brain's not fully functioning. So you can't pick up enough stuff and you can't process it enough. So all that stuff, that's why I say every childhood memory is inaccurate. You have to go back as an adult. From being an adult out here, you have to go back into that period of time in your life and reinterpret it. And it's exactly what Joseph said. He says, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And all he's telling you is that there's a different meaning to the same event. The way you experience it, the way you thought you were doing, the thought, as far as you could see, you thought this was the product. But guess what? There's more going on. The world's more complex. There's more to it. We're at war. Yeah, pay attention. Okay. So I take this period of time back here, the first 17 years or so, this history, including the stuff that occurs outside of your world, like if you came from a family that had mental illness in it, or if you come from a family that has alcoholism in it, or that impacts you. You're carrying it genetically, whether you have done something or not, experienced something or not. And it impacts the way you think, see, view, etc. Those are the things at the core of you that somehow you need to recognize when they show up and be willing to address, face, own, process, grapple with. My thesaurus is running out. Something, okay? Does that make sense? So this is my little way of showing it. These first 15 or so years, 15 years of life, I should have this much maturity. So I should have, but this area right here is a question mark. And it stays a question mark well into your adult life. And there are people that, because of that stuff, not processed, are at the mercy of it for the rest of their lives. And there are people that, for instance, dearly love somebody but never communicate it to them because that wasn't possible in their culture, context, experience, etc. Now I laugh about, I don't know who I was talking to, but somebody about Swedes. Any Swedes in the group? I don't want to offend you right off, but you know. What? Swedes don't hug very much. Maybe it's cold. I don't know what it is, but you know, they kind of stand here like this. They'll accept a hug, but they don't know what to do with their hands. You know, you're hugging them, and they're going, "No, I don't know." I'm not a big hugger. I like hugs. They're great. I think you need them. There's actual research that says it affects you. I mean, there's lots of stuff. So hugs are good. I've had to learn that. I'm not Swedish. But sorry. You know, but
Closet Swede.
What's that?
You're a closet Swede.
A closet one, or I'm a Norwegian. No. But you think that's contextual, right? So, you know, kind of stiff upper lip, fathers or males never express openly or in terms of touch and that kind of thing, affection for people. Well, we're designed to be touched, folks. Touch matters. But it's different in every culture. So cultures change this stuff, and so it affects the whole culture in some way. Language affects a whole culture in some way because language is limited. I've often scratched my head about the Tower of Babel and the United Nations, if you want to play off of that just a little bit. It's because it impacts this stuff. It's not that I have an answer for that. It's just simply I'm musing about it. You know, would one universal language be the best? What would that do to us, really? Make us feel like we're more in control, wouldn't it? There's a logic to it. It makes sense to have one, but at the same time, there was some reason why God said, no, I don't think this is so good. I'm going to disperse you. Because we want to ameliorate the differences. We want to get rid of them in some way, don't we? Okay. So these are just 6 elements that maybe you can think about. If you're going to go through the pain to grow, to heal, to begin to really know who you are as an adult, to begin to offload the encumbrances that you picked up back here, whether by design or default or misrepresentation or misunderstanding. I don't know how many times I've sat in a counseling office and heard somebody that's carried something for 20, 30, 40 years, a perception that they've never verbalized to anybody. And they verbalize it to me for the first time. Not because of me, just because of the setting. So they verbalize it to me, and then they look for a reaction. I know they are. And if I went, oh, get out of here, it probably wouldn't be very helpful. I'm guessing, but I haven't done that yet. Sometimes after they leave, I do things, I write furiously or something. No, not really. But it's amazing to me that we can carry something like that in the core of us, shaping, limiting us, where we have to protect that, because if that ever came out, we would be what? Rejected? Destroyed. Now we all carry that stuff, folks, because we're in a battle. And when Paul talks about the flesh, this is my understanding of the flesh. It's not some perverse thing that you're creating. It's your natural desire to self-protect, to survive, to not hurt. That's why clean pain is necessary to offload this stuff. Remember the text last night out of Daniel? Refine, purge, purify, take the trash out, remove the encumbrances, offload the sin. I got so hammered by sin when I was a kid, I didn't understand what the cross really did. The cross said that God did take away the sin. Hello. And I've never heard a sermon yet, I'm sure they're out there, but I've never heard a sermon yet preached on the passage in 2 Samuel 12 where Nathan is saying to David, okay, you've confessed your sin. David didn't ask for forgiveness, by the way. He just confessed his sin. And Nathan says to him, oh, by the way, God says he's taken away your sin. David didn't ask for that. David didn't deserve it. And it was taken away. We focus on that, and it stops us, and we don't want people to see it because I don't want you to know that I sin. But if you are a child of the King, he's not surprised, and he's not focused on it. We focus on it. We need to live out of grace instead of out of our self-made, whatever you want to call it, that allows us to try to control that stuff. Shame. Shame's a screaming killer here, by the way. I have a talk on shame that you can go watch sometime. It's a podcast, and it's from a year ago, and it's a product of 25 books I read on shame, and a spin-off of Brene Brown's stuff a little bit. I just thought there's something that's powerful about this, and there's a guy named Kirk Thompson, he's a psychiatrist, wrote called a book that, out of all of those, the book that was the most helpful, called The Soul of Shame, where he mixes theology and the understanding of biology and brain development and how you can actually do what Jesus did in Hebrews 11, where it says he despised. The word despised, translated despised in the Greek, means that he actually actively sought out shame and spit in its face. He renounced the shame in his life because shame will never tell you the truth, ever. But it's rooted in the base of our brain at some level. And Kirk Thompson actually makes a case for that and shows you why. And it's powerful stuff. Because if you listen long enough to enough stories, you realize shame is the line that drives it. And I'm at the point where I would say the only way sin ever gets into you is because shame carries it. It does not have access to you any other way. You have to let it in. You have to draw it in, and you draw it in. It rides in on shame, and shame won't show itself. Otherwise, it'd be easy to shoot, and that's why the word despise is interesting. Jesus says, who for the joy set before him endured the cross and did what? Despised. He sought out the shame, not just of the cross, but what shame does naturally. Because he had taken, the cross took care of the guilt. What's left? Its false sister, shame. Shame's at the core of why we don't grow. Shame's what stops us from moving. Shame's what keeps us from believing the wild, crazy, demanding, stretching message of the gospel. We don't get the good news quite often because we think we still have to earn it. We're back up here above this red line trying to earn something that we can't, that's already been given to us. I used to do with clients every now and then, I'd have them take a little box, wrap it up, put a bow on it, and then I would say, I want you to carry this box with you 24 hours a day for the next week until you come back. I said, I want it everywhere. By your bed when you're sleeping, take it to the toilet, set it on top of the toilet. If not, put it in your pocket. Hope you don't, like your phone, lose it in the toilet. But, whatever, carry it everywhere, right? Set it on the table. And when people ask you, just tell them, yeah, it's a gift I've been given. And if they ask you what's in it, you say, well, I don't know. I haven't opened it. If they ask you why, you say, well, blame it on me. I think we're going to get to heaven. Most of us be carrying that box, and most of us have not opened it. And that's what this is about. Our job, on our side, is to offload this stuff. The whole list that I just gave you is about offloading. It's about recognizing these pieces that I'm dragging around with me that are encumbrances, that keep me from running the race with freedom. And it's hard work, and it's slow, and you can't skip a step. It's not, you can't take 2 steps at a time. Wow, is that enough introduction for this morning? Does this make sense? Can you resonate a little bit? Have you got some comments? And then I'm going to do a different thing.
I just have a question. Earlier on, you had said you don't develop your personality, you grow into it. I don't exactly understand that.
Well, here's something that we missed in our culture. We think you can create a personality. Actually, in the language that I'm using today, that would be the false self. I believe that God gives everybody a personality. It's just given to you. You don't have to work at it. We're all different. And, some of you, defining personality is difficult, number one, but Nancy's sensitive, I'm not. Okay, we finally figured that out, and I'm pretty settled. I want to be sensitive, dang it, but I can't be like she is. There's a beautiful side to that, there's an ugly side to that. There's a beautiful side to what I am and an ugly side, right? Yeah, depending on how it's used, applied, understood, etc. I think God just makes you a unique person, and there's not going to be another one like you. And I think what we have done in our culture is that we've emphasized personality, quote, development, and not character development.
We have a friend who said he's got a great personality but no character.
Yeah, nobody ever told him. So I believe that psychology, for instance, has followed the same line. It moved character disorders, changed them to personality disorders, because character carries a moral weight. Personality doesn't. And who in science wants to mess with morals? Does that make sense? So it's my belief that what goes haywire in most of us is because God made us moral creatures, is the moral component is the thing that's the fly in the ointment. It's the sticky wicket. It's the messy piece of the puzzle. So what we're going to talk about now is we're going to talk about character development for the rest of the morning. Okay? And I'm going to give you a little, huh? We're going to take a little break, and I'm going to give you a handout, and then we're going to work through some elements, because I just want you to leave here with a little bit of knowledge of this, and then you can kind of set some goals maybe for yourself. We can't do it justice in a couple hours, so I'll just dump. You're going to get more out of me if you'll interrupt me, though. I just can tell you that, because I don't know what you're thinking. I don't know what words matter to you, etc. So that kind of clarification is really helpful, I think. Is that useful? Okay. Ready to take a break? Can we do it in about 10 minutes? I just feel really kind of frustrated that we have to eat lunch and go to the bathroom and stuff, but I recognize that it's okay. So I need a wedge in this diatribe I'm doing.